Welcome here to more TALKFCB and welcome back to the channel, guys. And I do have what I feel is a very, very interesting video coming up for you today, because we are going to be focusing on the defensive players who are at the very core and the heart of the embarrassing defeats that we've suffered in recent Champions League seasons. And we're going to be discussing whether it's time up, whether it's game over for some of these guys, even though they've achieved everything and some are legends of the club. Is it just time now to move on? It's all coming up, so let's get to it. And we are going to be focusing here, guys, on, like I say, the defensive players, the core of the defensive side of the team, who were either there involved in our defeat against Roma all of those years ago, then, of course, the season later against Liverpool, then there was Bayern, and more recently there was PSG. More upsets than I can handle, quite frankly, but we start in goal. Who was in goal for all of those defeats? Marc-Andre Ter Stegen. Now, don't get me wrong. On this one, I'm not saying, you know what, it's the end. It's time here to get rid of Ter Stegen. We have to move on from this goalkeeper. I'm not going to jump to that kind of conclusion here, but what I am going to say is Ter Stegen is somebody now who is receiving criticism. He was in goal for Roma, Liverpool, Bayern, PSG, so I think quite naturally, when you are the goalkeeper, despite the defence that he may have in front of him, you are still going to receive a bit of criticism. And in all of those games that he has been a part of, yes, I would say there are goals where he could have done better. There are moments there where he certainly could have done a bit more, but I would also say that in many of those games, he was actually part there of not making it worse. It could have been much, much worse on many, many occasions if it wasn't there for the saves of Marc-Andre Ter Stegen. And in general circumstances, I would probably say that, looking at the way that he has performed over the past season before that, he is often being one of our most consistent players, and it would seem very, very harsh here for Ter Stegen to be criticised. But right here and right now, I would actually say I understand the criticism. And the reason that I understand it is because now the expectations, they're different. Because let's not forget here, we are talking about now the best paid goalkeeper anywhere. And I mean anywhere in the world. You talk about Manuel Neuer, you talk about Jan Oblak, you talk about Donnarumma, all of these big goalkeepers in the world of football, Ter Stegen earns more than any of them. And that, by the way, was of his own request. He wanted to stay at Barça, but he did want to be the best paid goalkeeper. So that's why I understand here that suddenly now there is criticism. Because when you are the best paid goalkeeper, you've got to live up to those standards. You have to live up there to those expectations. If you want the biggest wage, you've got to put in the performances to match. And yes, for many of the time, he has done. But in the biggest games, he's still, like most of the team, he's not at his best level. And he hasn't been at his best level, and we do need more. And one particular area that I would highlight when it comes to Ter Stegen, I believe there, he needs to be braver in his goalkeeping. He needs to be braver there in 1-versus-1 situations, because you often see many goalkeepers, especially there, the top keepers, they'll be ready for the one-on-one situation, and they will make the attacker panic. They will force them to make a choice too quickly, or maybe a choice they didn't want to make. You don't give attackers time, and that's what I feel right now is Ter Stegen's biggest problem, because he's really sticking to his line. He's very, very afraid there to actually come out and sort of dive at the feet of players to really shut down angles, to make himself big. Right now you'll see Ter Stegen staying on his line, waiting to the last possible second, and then waiting to react to whatever comes his way. And I think that's not the way forward. You want to be there, closing down players when you can, like I say, rushing them into a decision. And I think, to be honest, it comes down right now to a lack of confidence. Ter Stegen is like much of this team who's had scars. They've had bad experiences in recent years, and I just think really he's a bit in between. He's not really sure whether to go, he's not really sure whether to stay, he's a bit indecisive, and that certainly is playing a part right now in what is, as we know, a wonderful keeper. He is, when he's at his best, he is the best keeper in the world. He has proved that at Barcelona in terms of his style, in terms of his goalkeeping. He can be outrageous. But we need him at that level, and we need him at that level in the biggest of moments. Up next, it's Gerard Piqué. Now, right now, Gerard Piqué is 34 years of age. He has won everything there is to win in football, in terms of club, in terms of country. He's seen it all. He's won it all. He has conquered everything, and much of it on numerous occasions too. Now, we all know as well that he has a lot going on away from the field. He's involved there in a number of different business ventures outside of football, in different areas there of business. And certainly, he's a guy who has a lot going on, but he has an awful lot as well going for him. He's got children. He's got Shakira. Honestly, what more more does Gerard Piqué want? What more does he need? And you look at it right now, does he need to continue? Does he need to do any more as a Barcelona player? Because he could walk away now. He could take more of a backseat role and still be remembered as a legend, as one of our most successful players ever, and most likely with Piqué, you know that in the future, he'll probably be back in the boardroom. He will likely take on a role in the future at the helm of this club. We all know about that. So right now, is there a need for him to just keep on going? And look, I don't think we should pretend here like Piqué hasn't even suggested it himself. Even after Bayern, he was the first to come out and say, you know what? We need young blood. We need young players to come into this team. And he even said, if I'm not needed, I will be the first to step aside. And that's what we need right now. We need somebody here to come into the club, be a leader, take on those decisions, take on that responsibility, and say, you know what? Either, yeah, Piqué, time's up. You've been brilliant. You have been outstanding. But now it's time for somebody else. Now, whether Piqué would accept a reduced role, coming off the bench, playing in rotational, smaller games, I don't really think that he'd be too interested in that. I think that if he's not going to be a starter, if he's not going to be playing the biggest games, Piqué probably won't really want to bother. And that's fine. Because like I say, he can walk away a legend. He can walk away an icon of this club. But we need somebody there to take on that decision. Because you can't let the players make up their mind. Yes, they're legends. Yes, they've done so much. But the club have got to be at the forefront here. The board have got to be the ones to say, you know what? The time is right now to move on. That's what we need this summer. Somebody there, like Laporta, a strong character who can shake up this group. And it's going to be so interesting to see what happens in the coming months. Then there is his partner, Clemént Lenglet, who there was involved in the game against Liverpool, the game against Bayern, and of course as well in the game against PSG. And honestly, when Lenglet was brought in from Sevilla, honestly, he was brought in as a backup player. And that is a role that probably he would have suited absolutely perfectly. Somebody there who could play when your two strong centre-backs were not available, somebody who could fill in when there were suspensions and injuries and things like that. But he was not supposed to be a starter. I honestly don't believe that. But he came in, suddenly, Umtiti wasn't recovering. He wasn't playing. He wasn't going to be back for a long time. And out of nowhere, Lenglet then sort of became, almost instantly, an undisputed starter overnight. And that was just something for me that was never meant to happen. Because you look at his first few seasons, you could say, yeah, you know what? He was pretty dependable. I don't think he's ever been up there with the best centre-backs. I don't think he's ever really dominated that area. But you know what? He was somebody there who usually didn't make too many mistakes. He would go along with his business. He could play with the ball at his feet. He's somebody there who you could just about get away with 9 times out of 10. But this season, it's been a car crash. And I would go back as well to the game against Bayern. You look at that game, he was at fault there for so many of their goals. Individual mistakes have crept into his game, and he has gone down for me a serious level this season. He's been a real problem at our defence. And right now, Lenglet cannot start in this team. You cannot look at him and say, you know what? Yeah, he is a top centre-back. He just isn't. He simply is not. And I think this season, that's been highlighted. He has been caught out. We need to have somebody else in that role. It seems harsh to say, but when you have defeat after defeat after defeat, you can't keep making mistakes anymore. You can't keep making excuses. Lenglet, sadly, has been nowhere near good enough. Then, of course, there is Jordi Alba, part of the teams against Roma, against Liverpool, Bayern, and indeed PSG. And, of course, Jordi Alba has had some absolutely terrific seasons at the club. We all know what he can do going forward. We all know about his long-standing relationship with Lionel Messi and the way they combine. It can be absolutely fantastic. But for so many seasons, we've lacked competition in that left-back role. And actually, Alba has become such a key player because we all know there's not really anything else. We know that Alba has to be available because there's nobody really that can replace him. We've had players over the year like Lucas Digne. We'd never give Cucurella a chance. Juan Miranda was never really given a chance. Now Junior Firpo hasn't really worked out. And Alba has just been allowed there to play however he wants. Doesn't matter if it's a good level, a bad level. He always knows he'll be in the team. That is a recipe for absolute disaster. As we saw against Liverpool, he was a big part of the loss that day. He contributed to many of their goals. And of course, we all know what happened to half-time there with Alba actually breaking down in tears. And for me, that was a real blow there to his mentality, one that I don't think he's recovered from. And I think you only really need to look at the time at the end of Luis Enrique's time at the club, because he actually didn't want Alba in the team. He actually there started to plan for life without Jordi Alba. He started leaving him out of the team. As soon as he did that, Jordi Alba started speaking to the media, talking publicly there about his frustration, so much so that right now Luis Enrique doesn't want Jordi Alba anywhere near the Spanish national team. And that should tell you everything. Right now, we should be planning long-term in that area for somebody else. We have to bring somebody in. Gaia has been mentioned in the press. For me, that would be an amazing move. Whether we can afford him, I honestly don't know. But we need to find somebody else. Not only to come in and challenge Alba, but actually replace him entirely. That's my view. And finally, of course, somebody who is sitting just ahead of that defence in those embarrassing upsets, it's Sergio Busquets. Now, Busquets is one for me. It's kind of one of those players there you don't want to believe that he's had his time. You don't want to believe that Sergio Busquets' time as such an icon in that midfield that it's over, but sadly, it just is. And that really does hurt me because Busquets in particular is somebody who I've admired over the years, and he was actually such an underrated player. For much of his career, he was a key player of Pep's team. He was a key player there when Spain were out winning everything. He was such a good and underrated player. And for many, many years, us Barcelona fans, we were convincing the rest of the world that, yeah, this guy, he is the real deal. Sadly, though, he is not that player anymore. He is a shadow of his former self. And the real sad part is, teams now, they actively target him. Much like the players in our defence, teams look at our midfield, they look at that central area, and they think, you know what, we can get at Busquets. We can get in behind him. And we all know, if you get in behind Busquets, if you navigate your way around him, he's not going to recover. He is not going to be able to do that. And that's a real problem. And it does cause us problems there. Big problems in midfield. And you look at it right now, he's 33 this summer. He's not somebody there who's really, really old, but I do believe he can't be a starter anymore. We can't be playing him every game in the big games all the time. It shouldn't happen, because again, I'd look to Luis Enrique's time at the club. He had a legend too, an icon in Xavi Hernandez, but he didn't play every game. He didn't even play most of the games. He was coming off the bench as an impact sub. Even in a Champions League final, Xavi started on the bench. And so we need people inside the club who will make these calls, because these guys, they are legends. They are icons. Some of these guys, I absolutely love watching them in their prime. But you can't let them run the club. You can't let them run us effectively into the ground just because they had their time. They've had their time. They were brilliant. We praise them for that. But you need to understand now the time to go, the time to step back and let new blood, fresh blood, young, exciting players step in and go and have their careers. Because now it's their time. And of course, guys, this for me was not an easy video to make. Many of these players, like I say, I am huge fans and have been huge fans for such a long time of. But you know what? Enough is enough. We've seen really disappointing losses. We're seeing the same thing over and over again, season upon season. And it gets to a point here where, you know what? We've cracked. You've got to say, enough is enough. We can't take any more. And that's why here, we've got to analyse the problems in our team, and we need a strong personality to sort that out. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What are your views on each of these players here that we have discussed today? Who has a future and who does not? Let me know that down below. I will see you soon, of course, with plenty more to come. But until next time, as always, Visca, el Barça.